So you hear a lot about forest fires in Borneo and Sumatra. The thing is, most of the fires that you hear about aren't spontaneous fires. They're ones that people set on purpose to clear land. And a lot of the fire setting is illegal because people are trying to clear land that they're not supposed to clear. And they come along and say, oh gee, there was a fire. What a shame, the forest blew down or burned down. I guess I'll have to put a plantation in here. The one on the left here is just a grass fire. It doesn't look too bad, but it can travel 1 kilometer an hour. This is a huge area of forest in East Borneo that was wiped out in the massive forest fires of 1997 and 98. I don't know if any of you would remember it, but the CBC did a documentary called Borneo Was Burning at that point because the whole island was on fire. The smoke hit Thailand, it hit Singapore, it hit all kinds of other islands. It was that bad. The whole island was going up in flames. And what they have to fight it, because duh, it's a drought, guess what, there's no water. They have single people going in and basically trying to bat out the fire with brooms and sticks. So you can imagine it's not very effective. That's when they try to put the fires out at all, but because the fires are set to clear land, they really don't want the fires to stop, so lots of times they just let them rage. Weak law enforcement is another problem. This is a sign right in the center here. It says that this is a protected forest, and you shouldn't cut the forest down and you shouldn't steal anything. Obviously, nobody has paid any attention because local people have built a house and are living there quite comfortably, apparently have been for a long time. Not only are they ignoring the sign, but the law enforcement agents are ignoring it as well because they haven't done anything to get the people out of the way. So even though probably both Malaysia and Indonesia have pretty good laws, if you don't have good enforcement, the laws are virtually meaningless. So people encroach on protected forests with basically no consequences. For orangutans, of course, you can see what's going to happen. More and more of them are dead or injured. The one on the top left was burned in a forest fire. The one on the bottom left, I'm not sure how well you can see it. He's actually was anesthetized because they were translocating him back into a forest. He was doing better at this point than he had been before. He'd been brought in to help him. If you can see here, it looks like his whole upper lip is missing. Can you see that? Yeah. And most of his bottom teeth. When you saw him up close, it looked like somebody had whacked him with a machete. So they had basically destroyed his lips and lost him half his teeth. That probably means it's extremely difficult for him to feed, and he's an adult male, has to fight. It's going to be extremely difficult for him to fight. So a lot of orangutans get badly injured by the fact that they're coming into contact with humans to the fact that they're probably seriously debilitated. The other mess that happens is a lot more of them get treated like commodities. They either get treated as substitute babies or living dolls, like this little guy dressed up like a human baby. There's nothing cuter than a baby orangutan, I can tell you. You can understand where people like them. But once they get big, they're not so cute anymore, and then people dump them, and regardless of that fact, you really just destroy their lives from them because you've taken them out of their normal environment. At the bottom, what you see are a bunch of orangutan skulls. If you look closely at some of them, they look like they've been antiqued up. They're for sale in souvenir shops in Borneo for tourists to buy. And in fact, now and again, you can buy an orangutan skull on eBay if you don't watch it. So people are killing orangutans on purpose to create souvenirs for people to buy. Okay. What's left for orangutans? This is a map of Sumatra here and Borneo here. This is Malaysia. Singapore's down at the bottom. Here's Java, and Bali's off the tip if any of you have ever been there. What's left, it's the pink colored areas with the red border around it, so you can see that all that's left for orangutans in Sumatra is this little bit up at the northwest. And in Borneo you see that there are more areas for orangutans, but they're all in little pieces. Somebody counted at one point and they counted over 60 different fragments, disconnected fragments that are now orangutan habitat. So of all the areas that orangutans were in, they're now in a lot smaller areas than they used to be. Also, there are particular views about how you should do conservation these days that are affecting how we take care of orangutans. If you remember, the estimate was there are about 60,000 wild orangutans surviving in the world. I'm not quite sure how many people the Air Canada Centre holds. Does anybody know?
20,000?
20,000? Okay, there are some stadiums, like a big soccer stadium that hold 50, 60,000 people, right? Mm-hmm. You fit all the orangutans in the world in a soccer stadium. But conservationists say we can't manage to find enough habitat to protect 60,000 orangutans. We're that crappy that we can't do We can't even look after 60,000 of them. So that what they've said is we need to identify priority populations, that is those populations that are especially important. We're going to have to let some of them go, maybe the really small fragments, and focus on the ones that are important, that are viable on their own, and that we really can save. So that's the first thing, is the numbers we're going to try to save are lower than the total population. Then for orangutans, you've got 2 countries to deal with, so each country is going to run its own show. And then they say we have to deal with species separately, so we can't just think about orangutans in general. We now think that Borneans and Sumatran orangutans are separate species, so we have to have different survival plans for each one of them. And in this case, you see that Sumatran orangutan, this is a number that's probably too high. I'm not quite sure what the priority populations are for Sumatrans, but it will be less than 6,500. For Borneans, the priority populations bring the numbers down to about 48,000. And there are about 38,000 of them in Indonesian Borneo and about 11,000 in Malaysian Borneo. So you're starting to get smaller and smaller packets. And then, just to let you know something about how this stacks up, I don't know whether you've heard this wonderful honor or not. The Sumatran orangutan is one of the top 25 primates in the world. Top 25 primates in the world in terms of being the most endangered primates in the world. Really dubious honor, but Sumatran orangutans at a population of 6,500 are within sight of extinction in the next probably 5 years if we don't do something fast. There'll be a few of them around, but basically the populations will be dwindling and they'll be on their way out. So at 6,500, they are in really serious problem. With Borneans, they're a lot larger numbers, but people now say there are in fact 3 distinct Bornean subspecies. It's not a homogeneous species in Borneo. There are subspecies differences, 3 geographically separated ones. Pygmaeus in the northwest, Wormbie, it's a guy's name, that's where the funny word comes from, I think. Wormbie in the central and west, and then Morio in the east. And pay attention to Morio because that's where I am, so Morio is the subspecies of orangutan that I'm looking at, so I'm going to focus on them. Where are they? That looks like it's Pygmaeus. It's in Sarawak and a little bit in west Indonesian Borneo. This is Wormbie. You can see there's quite a big area with orangutans still there. And then Morio, the East Bornean orangutan, is way over on the east. And you can see they're geographically separated, especially between the east and everybody else. And once you got geographical separation, you start to get evolutionary divergence or different adaptations. So you would expect there to be differences between these different subspecies because they're living in different kinds of habitat. And they're not mixing very much. Just to show you what they look like, some of you will recognize Molek from the Toronto Zoo. He's a Sumatran orangutan. You can see nice sort of golden orangey colored hair. And one of the things that's quite characteristic of Sumatrans is they often have quite whitish colored hair around around their mouths and sometimes around their genital areas. Okay. This is a Central Bornean orangutan. Looks pretty much the same. I mean, there are color differences, so I wouldn't count too much on the fact that he looks maybe a little bit darker. He's also a young orangutan. He's not an adult male. But you don't have the white hair around here. And then look what Morio looks like. Quite different, right? Now, they're not all that dark, but the East Borneo orangutans are the ones that people describe as maroon or chocolate or even black. So they can look quite different than the orangutans you see in other parts of Indonesia. It also turns out that they have some special characteristics that we'll get to in a minute. Okay. So anyway, if you come back to the numbers, let's see how the numbers look when you break them down into subspecies, and that's what you get. And again, for the East Bornean orangutan in Indonesian Borneo, that's the group I'm looking at. We'll look at them in particular. Only about 5,200 of them. So that means they're more endangered than Sumatran orangutans. If being Sumatran puts you on the top 25 in terms of being the most endangered species in the world, the East Bornean orangutan in the Indonesian part of Borneo is in worse shape than that. Pygmaeus is as well. They're in terrible shape. There are very few of those. But when you start thinking about subspecies, you can see that the numbers start to really come down and orangutans are in really difficult shape. Okay. So what can I tell you then about Morio and East Borneo and Kutai National Park, which is where I'm planning to work? What is it about East Borneo that would make Morio different? Well, basically, it is the worst available orangutan habitat. From Sumatra through Borneo altogether, the worst that you get is on the east. What makes it bad habitat or good? What basically makes habitat quality for orangutan? It basically all boils down to food production. If the food's good, they're happy. If the food's bad, they're not. Food for them